Hello, everyone, and welcome to HerdCon's Book Chats. And we are back again for Season 2, which will be focusing on horror-related books. And so we're excited to start that back up. For our first episode for our horror season, we're going to be looking at Bless Your Heart by Lindy Ryan. But before we get to that, I do want to provide a little disclaimer. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of Marshall University Libraries, the Department of English, the College of Liberal Arts, or HerdCon, but we are also very happy that these folks employ us. So without further ado, Meghan, you've got a little introduction for Lindy Ryan, and then we'll get into the book.
Sure. So Lindy Ryan was born and raised in Southeast Texas, but has lived all over the country. She currently works as a professor of professional science at Rutgers University and sometimes teaches in the MFA program at Western Connecticut State University. She's won awards for her children's book, Trick or Treat, Aleister Gray, and is the current writer-in-residence of Rue Morgue, a leading horror brand. In addition, Bless Your Heart has been optioned for a television series by writer-showrunner Emily Whitesell of Siren fame. The next book in the Evans family saga, Another Fine Mess, is scheduled for release in April of 2025.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, this is an interesting horror book. I think, I don't know, this was one of the ones that you had picked. So I was kind of curious what you had heard about it before. I was coming into it pretty blind. So.
I had seen it talked about on TikTok as like a fun return to like vampires, real vampires. Mm-hmm. And I was expecting more True Blood-ish. So I was really surprised when, especially with the cover specifically, it wasn't vampires being out in the open. Mm-hmm. I thought it would be the small town where, like, the PTA mom turned out to be this badass vampire, and they were working on taking her down. But that's definitely not what this book was.
Yeah, the cover, which I'll be happy to ramble about how bad a lot of book covers are that are made nowadays. But I really like the book cover of this one. But it does have that kind of vibe of this. I don't know if we use this term. It's a very derogatory term, but it has a kind of chick lit look to it.
Yes, for sure.
Even though those books that we associate with that moniker have been along of like women's melodramas, women's stories about their lives, their struggles, their adventures at home and abroad. And so it looks like that, except for the vampire. That's what you're thinking about, and then you have that kind of a story. This kind of women in a family. They've got their burdens. They've got their the stuff that they're going through, the stuff of life, and they're fighting vampires.
Yes.
They're basically fighting the undead. So I was thinking it's like a very strange mix of genres.
Yeah, I thought that too. When I got to the first kill scene, I was like, oh my gosh, I did not expect this to be so gory. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I do not have a light stomach, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
But it did take me by surprise in a really pleasant way, as odd as that sounds for talking about gore.
Yeah. And again, like if you don't know any better, I looked at a few of the Goodreads reviews of this and was struck by, like, I really like the family story. I wasn't a big fan of the gore, or like the gore was really good. And I don't know if this is like, it's one of those things where I quite like the book, and I really admired what the book is trying to do in terms of blending genres. But ultimately, I wonder like who's this for on a certain level?
Yes.
And I think this is a book for horror fans, people who enjoy stories about vampires and the undead and the supernatural. I think that fits. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if it's also trying to get some of those melodramas about women. I mean, again, that's a huge market in publishing. Readership is women women, middle class women, buy books and read them, whether it be romance, true crime. So you're gonna, you can help pay the bills if you can get that. But it seems strange. Like I feel like it's more like you're trying to get that audience to get into horror by having this kind of blend, as opposed to the horror people like, sure, I like this. So it is. I mean, it feels it is a genre book, but it's also innovative in that way.
Absolutely. And it really was the horror vibes that stood out to me. As a chick, I also like melodramas and romances and those kinds of things. But I am definitely a horror lover before any of that. And it was what I called literary jump scares throughout the book. You have that scene where the girl is in the alley, and it's this really, really strong build-up, and she's getting ready to get touched. And the chapter ends and we switch perspectives, but your heart is racing that entire chapter, wondering what is going to happen to this girl who has been set up to where I hope most people are very sympathetic and like Kim. I immediately, as soon as I saw how much she loved Dylan, her gay little brother, I was like, my heart was so warm. You can't let her die before she saves him.
Yeah. That's that's another thing. But thinking about the way the chapters are broken down, it makes me think about like film editing and the kind of thing, like maybe you've got 2 or 3 stories happening at once in a film, and the idea is once a scene kind of comes to its natural end, like, okay, we've said all the interesting things, they're kind of at a point, just go to the next part. And so I think strategically, in terms of narrative and in terms of momentum, the book does a good job of like getting us right to a scary point or an unsure point, or we're kind of left hanging on a cliffhanger in a chapter, and then it just bounces to something else which builds up, and then once they hit a crescendo, move it around. That just on a practical level, and just like something that keeps you interested in the book and the story, that works very well. But then also I think you've got the more literary part of it is the different narratives. So we get to see the characters. So this is third person limited. So we hear the minds of we get the thoughts of the characters and we see their actions, but it's not told from their perspective. There's a mediator in the third person, but we get how they feel. So we get to see how they feel about themselves, but also how other characters feel about them, how they feel about other characters, and how they misunderstand each other a lot.
Yes, they do.
And, they misread. And, like, I think about, like, there's Deputy Taylor and there's Sheriff. Somebody got my notes here. The sheriff, who's played by, Buck Johnson. These are maybe not the most. They're very like standard names.
Roger.
Yeah, a lot of the guys' names are very kind of Andy and Roger and Buck. Deputy Taylor's perspective on Sheriff Johnson makes him like this terrible, useless person. And that isn't exactly the case. And then Sheriff Johnson's perspective on his deputy is something similar, but that isn't the case either. So we get to see like the prejudices and the biases of the characters about other characters.
That was actually one of the things that I really loved about this book, was that interconnectedness that made this book feel like a small town.
Yeah.
Like you would have characters that you had no idea that were randomly connected over here, and they would just randomly drop that knowledge on you, and that felt like growing up in a small town. You might not know Ducey, but you know Grace, so you know everything about that family, kind of things.
I mean, it feels, in a way, it feels comforting, and in another way, it feels utterly claustrophobic and oppressive in that small town. And that gets fed in by the hot heat in the summer. I mean, the Southeast Texas, that's South-like, the American South. So you could say that this kind of has a Southern Gothic vibe to it. But yeah, it is just so stifling and oppressive, and everybody seems to be up in everybody else's business sometimes, but also like people have clearly cordoned off things and kept things to themselves. So it is that kind of, there's the comfort of the small town, and then there's the too comfortable part of the small town.
The secret seething underneath the happy side. Talking about Deputy Taylor, I wanted to like Roger so bad. And I think I would have had he not been so petty. You find out a dead body's been found, and yet you hold up some teenagers over truancy. Like, that part just killed me so much. I could not get over that. I was like, you are a petty man.
When I kind of read it, I felt like, well, I'm kind of interested in the Crane character, who is this goth kid. Very disconcertingly, he had transferred from Colorado and had went to Columbine High School, so it sets it in that the milieu of the 1990s after the Columbine shooting, and he just automatically looks extraordinarily suspicious. And like, I got like, yeah, he does behave. He has some suspicious ass behavior, and yet he feels like a total red herring. It's like he's not the trouble.
Yes, I got that feeling the whole time. I was like, it's not going to be Crane.
Yeah, but getting back to Taylor, it was he's like caught up in his own thing so much that he becomes ineffective.
See, I think for me, I would have been kinder to Taylor had he really been worried about the kids because something was going on, when instead he was just doing this to get at the woman that he could never have. I think that was where it broke me for Taylor. He wasn't worried about these kids with these murders on the loose. He was mad at Grace.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we also see, in that small the pettiness. I think particularly, and how I guess this kind of cyclical generations repeat the same darn mistakes of everybody else. I mean, you've got Taylor, who's pining for Grace Evans, and then you've got Sheriff Buck, who's pining for Ducey, and she's kind of it seems a lot easier for Ducey to kind of say no to Sheriff Johnson, like, I'm not interested, buddy. But it very much, as you see the ways, like, each generation is just repeating the same dumb mistakes over and over again.
And I think that is interesting because a lot of the book, especially featuring on Luna, the youngest Evans woman or girl, Luna there, the whole thing with her, her whole character is learning the family secrets and learning that this is going to be pushed onto her. She doesn't really have any choices. Yeah. But the whole talk is about like information and spreading it too late. So I don't understand how they keep doing the exact same thing over and over. Because the way they talk, they did the same thing to Grace. They tried to keep Grace out of it. And I'm like, wouldn't it be easier on these women if you like raised them with that knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the sensible thing to do. But yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly baked into this kind of guilt. I think particularly in the case of Grace, Luna's mother, that, and of course, as if you've read the book, you know that she had a love affair with a man named Samuel, and he was a vampire. And then I guess they gave birth to Luna, who is, for all intents and purposes, something like Blade in the Marvel comics. So it's kind of a mix of a human and a vampire. And there's all this guilt about putting this burden on people. And I think that's, yes, of course, it makes sense. Like, just tell them that you gotta have to do this. But, you know, I mean, the pain of, you know, I think it's also in a sense of like a family business, you know.
I was also thinking of it as the end of puberty.
Yeah.
Because you have the blood, you have the women coming into their own, they're taking on this new responsibility. It very much struck me as pubescent.
Oh God! Yeah.
Opening.
yeah. The Edwin Booth scene where he's in the kind of locker, the body locker, and he just starts knocking, and the blood is coming out everywhere, and Luna is freaked out, and yet all the other Evans women are like, yeah, this is just what usually happens from time to time, and it's hard not to get. I'll say I'm a guy. I don't know any. I have not experienced this, but kind of depictions of menstruation and those kind of things. It just really like vividly hits you over the head with it. I'll put it that way.
Sure.
And you know that how normal this becomes for these women. and how and Luna very much more or less being a kind of POV character for her. She's experienced this stuff for the first time, so we get to share her shock at some of these things.
I will say that I was very frustrated at the beginning with the pacing, because I could see where it was going and I'd be like, okay, come on. And then it would just keep going. But I feel like the longer the book, I don't know if I got used to the pacing or if it sped up. I'm not sure which it was. But there at the beginning, I was a little struggling.
I mean, is this like the problem of any like horror narrative? Like, an example of like zombies, like, you know, we the living now in our present timeline, or whatever constitutes our existence, if we saw like strange people rising from the grave and eating living human beings, we think those are zombies, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And this is what we heard about zombies. But I feel like every horror narrative vampire, they have to kind of explain themselves a little bit, where we as readers are like, okay, we know what this, we have a strong idea of what this is, but every, you know, and again, it's not like anyone has like, these are the definitive rules on vampires and how they behave, because they can be a lot of things. You can have the big shiny vampires, you can have the sexy vampires, you can have the tired and depressed vampires, you can have the funny you can have all these kind of vampires, and it's, you know, these are a particular kind of vampire, so everybody has to kind of explain it. And I imagine someone that reads a lot is like, okay, let's move along here, so I can understand that.
But I do like that even our main characters don't know the cause. They're like, the cause doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We just have to fix it.
Yeah, it is a lot like the cliched expression, you're trying to fix the plane while the plane is flying kind of thing. So they've been dropped into this world where they have to take care of the undead, and they don't know all the ins and outs of it. And it's a good way to kind of like, those stories are just stories. But some of them have some basis in fact, but it also like it allows this narrative to be its own thing about the undead.
Sure. And as much as I like that it doesn't matter, especially now that I know we're getting a sequel, I hope we get more into that, like, what is the power of the ashes? Why does it seem like Lenore is the only one that cares about what these ashes can do? I mean,
of all the, she, thinking about Grace being guilt-ridden, then Lenore is really, really guilt-ridden, and she seems a little OCD.
Yes.
That, you know, she's winding these clocks all the time. She is doing her best to control things, and she seems the most inquisitive of them. Of like, what does this do? How do I keep things at bay? Whereas Ducey is much more great granny action hero to an extent. You know, she loves Walker Texas Ranger, so she idolizes as a woman of action, and, you know, take care of the problem, ask questions later.
I also feel like Lenore, out of everyone, is the one who loses the most. She is the one that takes the most heartbreak.
Yeah.
I mean, her mother, her daughter, the love of her life, like, all within a very short session. No wonder she is the way she is.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's like, this is the person who can hurt who can we hurt? It's like Ryan's what is the character I can hurt the most in my book, and it is the grandmother. I'll kill her mom and kill her daughter, and
in the same night.
Yeah, in the same night, and then now she's taking care of her granddaughter
and having to introduce her into this life.
Yeah. And she has a dog that she doesn't want, and so I mean, I think it really leaves a lot. You know, Lenore's in definitely not the best place.
Yeah.
By the end of this book,
for sure. I mean, that ending though, those last few sentences were very intriguing.
Very, very, very images, very beautiful. I thought it was like, ooh, yeah. It's a thing where you could, you know, if it was only one book, you could leave it hanging, and I'd be like, that's an impressive way to kind of end things. But it does kind of. I would be interested in what would happen next.
Me too. I'm wondering, does that character come back as Strigoi, or did the ashes actually heal them?
Yeah, or does it make somebody into something else?
So I guess I'm very interested in where this is going to go.
Yeah, definitely.
But because I can see a lot of open places for Lindy to take it. And like I said, I really found that I really do like her writing style. I feel like this was written by someone who not only knows horror books, but knows horror movies very well. That's what the cuts, as you said, they're so good.
Yeah, and it is, yeah, I guess in some ways you have, I think, good horror is that juxtaposition of the normal world and the kind of horror world. And I think in a lot of ways, like the funeral parlor, the Evans Funeral Home, is really an apt kind of way to think about horror because people in the mortuary sciences, they provide an important essential service to communities. They look after and help to facilitate the passage from death, from life to death to the grave, and to honor those people. But also, they probably got some really messy stuff that they have to do as part of their job. And so there's this veneer, these very, on the surface, very delightful, pleasant, well put together women as far as like the way they dress, and they have a good presentation. But then there's all the messy, gooey stuff that they have to deal with. And let's face it, there's the surface of our humanity and the messy, gooey stuff that we see plenty of when characters get killed off in this series, in this book.
For sure. And I also think that it's interesting with the women that the town clearly respect them, but that doesn't mean they like them.
Yeah.
They are like, and they just have to be there, but that doesn't mean that they are wanted or liked in this town.
It's like they're outsiders in a way. They're kind of in this liminal spot, I think it's just that kind of creepy aspect of someone that works and runs a funeral home, which I always think like, hey, that's a job, and they're a community. They do an important job, and just be nice to them, So it always seems a little strange, but it seems like there is that are kind of on our lizard brain level or kind of repugnance at the idea of that there's a business that handles not only dead bodies, but the dead bodies of the people you care about the most.
For sure. And I did find it interesting, though, that didn't rub off on Snow. Even though Snow would still handle the dead bodies, she made them presentable. She didn't do the cleanup. And I thought that was an interesting look at how the town accepted Snow when they wouldn't really accept the Evans in the same way.
Yeah. And it's kind of hinted at, I think it's kind of hinted at the book that Kim could be the next person that comes in. It's kind of like a transitional figure in another, it's something that is a character who's a bridge between the more normal world and the world of the Evanses. So
for sure. And we have Deputy Taylor now, who knows the truth, and Crane.
Yeah. And it's really a lot of ways is the whole, like, we pretty much start in the same place that we end. It's just everything just goes around, and then a lot of people die, but a certain norm or status quo gets returned to. Not a pleasant one for a lot of the characters, but it is kind of their the vampire has been quelled for now, kind of thing.
I also liked this book. If you were looking for a hunky man that you're not going to find it here.
No, there's no.
When they were describing Crane as like greasy haired, I was just like, really, really, Luna.
Smelled of cigarette. It smelled a lot of cigarette. He's smoking Virginia Slims. He's probably I don't know how bathing optional, but a little. He seems like he has some really good lines. He's very snappy, but also he's really he's really cheesy too.
He is an edgy teenager through and through.
There's one part, I think, when the final conflict, when he's trying to protect Luna, he's got some sage or something that he's like, it's like, okay, that's not going to help. But yeah, they are, I think there are men who, some can be nice enough, but who are ultimately ineffective in what they do. The deputy, Officer Henson, Sheriff Buck, even Crane. But it's the women, and this is a woman's story. They're the emphasis. They are the ones where the stakes are and the decisions that they're going to make, and they do this willingly. Like this is my choice, and I'm going to attack this Strigoi and then I'm going to die, but I'm going to take the Strigoi out. So
I also feel like having the ineffective man is also like an ode to those slasher films. We see, I mean, this is 3 years after Scream came out, so we see the dads who are unable to protect their daughters, the police aren't going to help you, those kinds of things. So I always like see those flashes of classic horror in that ineffective man. He's not going to save you.
I mean, it goes all the way back to Bram Stoker's Dracula and any of those iterations is all these guys, the original Dracula, all of these guys can't figure out how the vampire keeps doing what he's doing and how ineffective and useless they are. Some of them eventually figure some things out, but they cannot protect their good, decent, moral women from the threats. So it's something that goes way back to that. And I would say, looking at not only in the horror genre, but also in novels and films that we categorize kind of women's melodrama, that's also a certain thing. Like the men are kind of de-emphasized in the story. They're a little they're not helpless, but they're a little bit lesser than the women protagonist in those stories.
For sure. I mean, we see some of the women get a little petty, but it's almost always the men in this book that have that petty drive to them. The women are just like, we just got to get it done.
Yeah. I've never heard of men being petty before. That's completely absurd. No, yeah. Pettiness it goes beyond all. It inhabits all genders. So yeah.
For sure. All right. Any final thoughts or any last things you would like to mention about Bless Your Heart?
I was thinking, I will say I do want to appreciate that this is a book that doesn't kill the dog, and I get really sensitive about this because I know I'd actually recently seen. I hope I'm not spoiling A Quiet Place Day One for you or anything, but I remember there were like literally on people online, and I did. Does the cat die at the end of A Quiet Place Day One's like, nope. I was like, okay, I'll go watch it. It's something that like, and a lot of the people that get killed by the Strigoyas are innocent people, and they've done, and they're actually trying to be helpful in a lot of cases. But it's just something about that wholly innocent animal that you don't want to see. Like somehow you want to make sure they endure, they survive. So I appreciate that. Although it kind of the book kind of does a little like do I wonder do they secretly have a zombie dog now or something, because that's where they figured out that the ashes of the Strigoyas have some sort of healing properties. So therefore, what kind of dog is this now? But yeah, it's just a little thing, and I used to not care about it as much in my younger days, but I'm kind of sensitive. I like cats and dogs, cats more than dogs, but I don't want to see them die uselessly in horror stories.
Do you know about the website Does the Dog Die?
I mean, that seems pretty self-descriptive, but is it all these kind of texts that does the dog die?
It's movies specifically, and it started out as just dogs, but now it's a full list of trigger warnings.
Yeah.
And people who've watched the movie go in and say, so you can get descriptions or you can just see like red, yes, this is in this. And I use it religiously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it also speaks to our, I quite enjoy the gore and the gore descriptions in this book, and I don't mind watching gore in film or reading about it. The descriptions of gore quite inventive in this, and revealing and reveal character. I think it's really nice. That's really some of the best writing is dealing with that. I got no problem with that, but some dog or a sugar glider or something like that. I'm just like, no.
Anything furry or scaly.
Yeah.
Feathery.
Something clearly does not deserve. If there was like an evil dog that was secretly killing other people or something, I'm like, okay, it's okay if that dog dies in a story. But yeah, if they're just being a cat or a dog, I can deal with. I don't like it. So.
Same. Have you seen the movie Legion? With Paul Bettany in it.
No, I haven't seen that one.
If you do, the old lady in the main beginning of that movie reminds me of the vampire lady, the little grandma, Miss Milner. Mm-hmm. The whole time she was described, I was thinking of the woman in Legion.
So. Yeah.
Also, a vampire who's losing his teeth everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose they can regenerate if they get enough nutrients. But yeah, it is like, yeah, I mean, the fact that I think it's interesting here that the viciousness that the developing Strigoi have destroy the human body so badly that yet that thing still rises. And I think it's very disturbing to see like just innards and a tongue or a face or something like that, or something's missing.
The description of being gummed.
Yeah.
Oh,
there's a lot. You have a lot of Luna's dreams about teeth falling out, which is a common dream that people have. It's not just me. That sense of the loss of control, fears of death. One of the things I noticed is this is a particularly throaty book. There's a lot of stuff where people feel something caught in their throat. There's a weight. There's a fair amount of vomiting in this book. I'm like, ooh, let me get some air as I read this book, because it's a very nauseating kind of book to read in a good way. But it does have I think a lot of those descriptions are very apt to that, being overwhelmed by scents and odors and spectacles. That's another part I think was very effectively written. But you just feel like everything is like I was reading this, I was constantly clearing my throat. I'm very prone to do that if you have watched any episodes like this. But it's like, oh, there's something in my throat. This is something in the character's throat. So it is clearly like a motif running heavily throughout the novel.
One of the motifs that I picked up on many years ago, BuzzFeed started a Facebook group that was like a book club. And one of the things they pointed out was how many books say she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. And so now when I read a book, I notice that very clearly. And this book is definitely one of those books where several characters let out a breath they didn't know they were holding.
Yeah.
All right. I think that both of us have said we really enjoy this book.
Yeah, I would be interested in reading this. This I think, given the heat, given the subject matter, since it's just the kind of melodrama and horror elements, it makes a pretty good beach read. I figure that's why they're putting it out in April or May. This one, I think the next one's coming out in May. So yeah, and a pretty momentum. It's a book with momentum to it. So I quite enjoyed it. So
this, and I'm excited to see what they do for a TV show. Hopefully they keep it true.
I suspect, I'm just gonna guess here, they're probably going to try to keep the family around a little longer, so they'll go through their adventures and stuff like that. I think it's something that I think would make for a good TV, small town family, women having trouble with love, the undead. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that could make for a compelling TV show. But I feel like they're probably going to have to add more stuff than what's here in the story itself to kind of
Absolutely. I mean, maybe we might see a return of Grace and Ducey there at the next book.
Who knows?
They both got some ashes.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
All right. So if you've read Bless Your Heart or you think it's something you want to read now, let us know.
And make sure to like and subscribe to HerdCon. Take care and be well.